What's good? What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Urban Platform Speaks. Make sure to like and subscribe as you come into the channel, check out the content. And with that being said, man, I want to speak on a post that came across my Facebook feed, right? And it was UNC versus Duke, right? And so you see the players on there, you got five North Carolina basketball players versus five Duke players, right? Now, I don't know if these, if they think that these are the best basketball players for North Carolina or the best basketball players from Duke. Uh, I think, well, first, I guess you for North Carolina, I think those are the best basketball players that came through this program. In my opinion, I think those are. Now for Duke, if if these guys are the best basketball players for Duke that ever came through there, I don't think so. I would replace JJ Redick with Bobby Hurley, but I guess they going by position. I guess they going by position. Zion, I don't think was better than what's the guy named Danny Ferry. I don't think Zion was better than he definitely wasn't better than Danny Ferry. So I don't know. But overall, I'm gonna just go by what they presented on this list right here. So I have always like even watching North Carolina and Duke throughout the years. I always thought that North Carolina was a better program. I like North Carolina better than I like Duke. I Now when Duke had in their early days when they had Tommy Amaker and Johnny Dawkins, I thought those were some good teams. But overall, I always thought North Carolina teams were better than Duke, and they used to go back and forth. It wasn't always like North Carolina was always going to win. It wasn't like that. But with these guys here, now I'm gonna go position by position, I guess. So at the point guard, I guess you would have Mike playing point guard, and then you got Kyrie point guard for Duke. So definitely, if Mike had to play point guard, he a better point guard than Kyrie, and at both ends, like Mike Mike, he had pretty good assists when he had to do that, and that if that was his job. So I would give the edge to Michael Jordan over going with that list. Mike would be the better point guard. And so next you got Vince Carter, who I guess would be the two guard on this team. Vince Carter. Um, and I would put Vince Carter. I think Vince Carter is a better player than JJ Redick, but I would put Vince Carter up against Grant Hill for Duke, right? So those are the matchups. So who would win in a Vince Carter? Wow, that's tough. Vince Carter and Grant Hill matchup. That's tough. Um, in college, who had the best career? Vince was mean in at North Carolina in college, and I think Grant Hill was mean too. That, in my opinion, the Vince Carter versus Grant Hill, I think that would be a tie. I would have to go be a tie because I don't really feel comfortable picking Vince Carter over Grant Hill. Grant Hill was the man at Duke, so I don't really feel comfortable with that. Um, Vince Carter was a highlight, but he jumped out the gym. But as a matter of fact, I'm not even gonna say it's a tie. I would give it to Grant Hill. So you got one for North Carolina, one over one for Duke. So you got Grant Hill for North Carolina, and you got Michael Jordan for Duke that would beat those that matchup. Then so now you go to like the small forward position, which would be James Worthy versus Christian Laettner, or now Christian Laettner will be your power forward or your center. So that would put James Worthy against like Zion. And in my opinion, and I'm not just saying this because I'm old school, I would give the advantage to James Worthy. in that matchup. So you got two players, Michael Jordan, James Worthy, who are the best for their team, and in Duke you only got one guy in Grant Hill. Now you go to the power forward position, and who would you put at power forward against Antoine Jameson? They don't really have anybody on Duke that would be a power forward that can play Antoine Jameson. So I would have to go with North Carolina again, right? You got Michael Jordan who win his matchup, James Worthy would win his matchup, and you got Antoine Jameson who would win their matchup. Now, the fifth and final matchup would be Rasheed Wallace versus Christian Laettner. I think Christian Laettner had the better career in college, although and that's tough to say with like the career that Rasheed Wallace. But I think overall, like Christian Laettner has gone down as like one of the greatest college players to have ever played. And I don't think that, even though Rasheed Wallace had a great career at North Carolina, I don't think his career eclipses Christian Laettner's career. So you have three players for North Carolina that I think was the best out of those two matchups, and then you have two players on Duke that will win their matchup or had better careers. Now, who do I think would win between those two teams? And I broke it down to positions because I just think that like the advantage on that North Carolina team, they had more talent. And so with that being said, I think that North Carolina would win. Like if those two teams had the opportunity to play against each other, all of those players was healthy and in their primes, I think that North Carolina would beat those teams. Like in the old era, like in the 80s and the 90s, that style of basketball North Carolina would beat. And in today's era, in the era of positionless basketball, I think that team will also beat, because North Carolina still have guys who were like interchangeable, who could play. Like Rasheed Wallace could play power forward, and he could play away from the basketball. Well, Rasheed Wallace would be your center for North Carolina. Antoine Jameson, again, he could play under the rim, but he could move away from the basket and shoot too. James Worthy, he had a decent mid-range game, and he could play and cover at both ends. And so you got Mike and Vince; those guys were athletic and they could do it. So overall, like I said, now when you get down to Duke ball players, I don't think Christian Laettner away from the goal will be able to defend, like they do in today's game. JJ Redick, although he's good on the offensive end. I think he would be a liability on the defensive end. Then you have what's the guy named Zion Williamson. Zion would be a liability on defense, and he would be limited on offense. So in today's game, I still would have to give the edge you know, to the North Carolina team. And Kyrie Irving, offensively, he would be a beast. But on the other end, so that Duke team, they have good players that can play on the offensive end, but they don't have anybody in that will be able to defend in any era, won't be as good a defender in each era. So, and I broke it down like that for the eras because you know how people this era, the modern era is different from like I said, the 80s and 90s and the early 2000s. But that North Carolina team, in my opinion, would smash that Duke team. It was smashing. Although you got Christian Laettner and Grant Hill, who I think they would win their matchups, you know. But I don't think that they will be able to beat that North Carolina team. I just don't feel like that. That North Carolina team was just this North Carolina team would be a beast, with Vince Carter just jumping all over the place and dunking on people, then Rasheed and Antoine Jameson, them guys just dominating in the post. along with James Worthy. Though, all those guys would just they would just smash Duke. And then, when you think about Duke ball players like going on to the NBA, I think all of North Carolina, not all of them, but these guys at North Carolina, I think also had better careers than most of the players at Duke. So North Carolina players, in my opinion, seem to do better in the pros than Duke players. So I like North Carolina. I was a big fan of that North Carolina program. Duke, I just had individual players that I liked at times, but other than that, I just think that North Carolina program just turned out the better pros, and they to me, I thought North Carolina for the most part was a better when Dane Smith was there. I thought that North Carolina versus Mike Krzyzewski was a better program, and that's like they number one and number two, you know, out of all the programs, in my opinion, with probably Georgetown coming in a close number three. Yeah, yeah, I thought Georgetown be number three. Then I probably pick like Syracuse as my favorite, my fourth favorite team. But yeah, let me know what you think. Who do you think would beat that matchup? Do you think it would be North Carolina would win that matchup, or do you think Duke would beat that matchup? Like I said, I'm going with North Carolina. And, that's my take on it. Uh, with that being said, make sure to like and subscribe. Also, don't forget to leave a comment, and I will check you all out.